We talked about Winston the other day, right? The problem with tank is you could dive a Reaper, Bastion, Torbjorn backline, force all their cooldowns and live, then jump out and get 0 dopamine from tickies, and you only win because you force all the cooldowns. So me as the Plat Winston player feel like I can't do anything. In fact, I am doing nothing because I can't kill anybody. But in essence, I'm actually doing a lot. I just don't realize it yet. Because if you think about it, like this whole mechanics discussion, we're talking about like why mechanics matter the most. But like it's really a larger conversation about like how do video games reinforce you for doing the right thing, right? Like think about like in Overwatch 1. What did you get in your stats? You press tab, you got kills, you got deaths, you got objective time. Now, early on in the game's understanding, maybe by bot devs, say what you will, people were like, oh, objective time. You know, I got a lot of objective time, so I was playing the objective. I was helping my team, right? I got gold objective time. But that became kind of a meme later because we all were realized that, like, you know, objective time doesn't really matter. Like, it's about the quality, it's not the quantity, you know, and all that kind of foolishness. And some people shouldn't be touching the objective at all. But then what we've been replaced with is, like, we have scope accuracy, biotic nade kills. We have more and more helpful stats. But ultimately, especially when you think about a team game, it is really hard to quantify the value that you're bringing through stats. Because the first stats that we look at are damage, eliminations, assists, things like that. And at least one or two of those are fairly useless, right? Like you could farm damage stats by playing more aggressively and demanding more resources. You could cut down on your deaths by disengaging fights that are already lost instead of dying at a point, which is a good way to cut down on your deaths, but doesn't really provide any significant meaningful benefit to your team. You can have higher sleep dart accuracy if all you do is you sleep dart the tank. Watch me miss this. I just knew it, right? But the sleep darts aren't maybe not as impactful as like sleeping a DPS or sleeping a support. You could get a lot of biotic grenade kills, but maybe you're dying at the expense of using your biotic grenade aggressively. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but like basically stats don't tell the full story. But that's the problem with like team games in general is that the reason why that's a problem is because then how do you judge an objectively good performance from an objectively bad performance? Like, how do you use sleep dart? What is a good use of sleep dart and what is a bad use of sleep dart? Now, you guys, again, on my channel, know the answer to that, or at least have a pretty good guess. And the same thing goes with biotic grenade. You guys know what good positioning for Ana is and what bad positioning for Ana is. But the thing is you don't always get the reinforcement that tells you that that's bad or that's good. For example, if I use my sleep dart in tank and I walk away with 75% sleep dart accuracy, I might think that that's a good use of sleep dart. But what I'm missing out on is the value that I'm getting elsewhere that may not be as immediately obvious to me. Another great example is, I don't know if you guys heard me talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but I was coaching a Mercy player and we were talking about Valkyrie, right? And he was saying like, how do I use Mercy? And I swear, every time I get asked that question, I'm like, how do you not know how to use Mercy? Like, isn't it obvious? Like you just Valkyrie when you use, or how do you just, when the fight starts, use Valk, right? And then I realized the problem is with Valkyrie is that because it doesn't directly counter anything immediately off the bat, it doesn't feel like, oh, I popped trance, I countered their blade, I countered their Orisa ult with beat, or I rallied and I pushed and I killed somebody. You pop Valkyrie, you give your team like this passive advantage, right? For an extended period of time, which is really powerful, but you may not feel the advantage that you give your team. The advantage that you give may not be like positively reinforced, right? You might be like, oh, we won the fight, but I don't feel like I did anything to contribute to it, right? Now, some of you might say that's also part of Mercy's problem fundamentally, but I think it goes a lot further than that. We talked about Winston the other day, right? The problem with tank is you could dive a Reaper, Bastion, Torbjorn backline, force all their cooldowns and live, then jump out and get 0 dopamine from tickies, and you only win because you forced all the cooldowns. So me as the Plat Winston player feel like I can't do anything. In fact, I am doing nothing because I can't kill anybody. But in essence, I'm actually doing a lot. I just don't realize it yet. So I guess my point is that the problem with Overwatch and maybe just team games in general, I don't know if there's a solution to this, is that you don't always know when you're contributing value. You don't always know when you're applying pressure. This happens all the time with Tracer. How many times have you guys played Tracer, gone on a flank, shot the Bat Brig Torbjorn in the back, made them look at you for like 5-6 seconds, and wondered if you actually did the right thing? You didn't kill anybody, you didn't show up in the kill feed, you did like 176 damage over like 10 seconds. You didn't die, but you don't know if you did anything. Was it worth it? Was the pressure worth it? Did I contribute anything? So That's the problem, right? Is you don't get the positive reinforcement. And this is why this ties, I think, in with the mechanics thing, is because if all you do is chase the tickies as Tracer and go for assassinations, you're not going to be playing the hero to its full capabilities, and you're going to be throwing a lot of fights. If all you do with Winston is jump on top of the Bastion because you really want to hear those tickies, and you're not thinking about baiting cooldowns, then you're going to lose a lot of games. So it almost feels like the problem with team play is the problem with the human brain, where we want to be the person scoring the points and making the getting the tickies, but we don't always have that intangible value system metric that tells us that we're doing the right thing. Think about playing a pickup basketball game. What does everybody want to do? They want to be the guy taking the shot. They don't want to be the guy covering the defense, setting the screen, or making the pass. Why just teams games though? I think even in single player games, it can be unclear what was and what isn't good. That's true. The problem with team play games though is that I think there are more intangible impacts. You can blame your teammates. You can blame, oh, maybe I did the right thing, but the enemy team popped off. Or maybe I did the right thing, but my bad teammates messed me up. In team games, there's a lot more intangible value through the support class and the tank class, where you have more value besides just getting kills. It's also through just supporting other people surviving. Like if I have a great turret placement on Iliari, and it's on an angle, right? And it keeps my Tracer alive in a 1v1, I don't get any dopamine kicks off of that. At least not directly. Most people aren't, right? I'll get dopamine ticks off of doing stuff like this, right? Because I don't even see it necessarily. Because let's face it, guys. You guys ready for level 3 of this discussion? The problem with that is people would rather, unironically, perform well than win. You hear me? Remember we had this conversation the other day. People would rather have the impression that they performed well than win the game because they got more dopamine about it and they could feel like, oh, I carried, right? People would rather feel like they carried fill in the blank sport or game than win the game. Because it's less satisfying to feel like, oh, I was the supporter, but not the reason that we won. I want to be the big shot. Again, my analogy last week was asking you, would you rather, think back to your high school sports. Would you rather have been the big shot and gotten all the accolades and all the sports and all the support from the team and won 1 or 2 fewer games? The answer is yes. Oh yeah, you definitely would have. I know I would have. I'm not going to try to pretend to be humble here. But I 100% would have traded it. So that's the problem, though, is because in a first-person shooter / team game, you actually have the option to, with some of your decisions, at least to an extent, to choose me over other people. And so the game has a hard time rewarding you making the right decisions that are more supportive of your team, besides handing you the W. But even then, you might not really realize that. Because sometimes you do need to be taking responsibility for yourself. Somebody who tries to play to improve, not caring about winning, is intentional. Yeah, and it's hard to do too. I don't think that this is a problem that you can fix. I want to be very clear on that. I think it's just a question of like, is this something that they can improve? And it's a good reminder, right? That just because you feel like you're carried, just feel like you perform well. Like I realized this firsthand in my own tank gameplay. Because whenever I play tank, usually Winston or Orisa, I play very resource heavy. Not on purpose necessarily, but I play very resource heavy. I always demand resources. So even when we lose, I usually have really good stats. And so what that leads me to always feel like is I feel like I always perform well, but that's because I always demand more healing resources than the average person. But then I have to like objectively look at that and be like, I was forcing my supports and tanks to like play, or DPS to play more around me. And then, we're going to lose more games because I play overly aggressive.